The African National Congress turns 113 years old next week. The party will kick off its January 8th statement activities with the national chair and deputy president doing door-to-door campaigns in Khayelitsha ahead of the big event on the 11th in the Western Cape. Now, the ANC's main objective in its 112th January 8th statement was a decisive win in the May 29th elections, which proved to be a failure. What should constitute the party's 113th January 8th statement in order for the ANC to reignite support across the country? Now, political commentator and lecturer at the Central University of Technology, Leeto Nthoba, joins me now. Leeto, good morning. Welcome to Newzroom Afrika.
Good morning, Ms. Chaba, and thank you for having me.
So what should the ANC's message be in 2025, considering losing 2024 elections and its members?
I think the first thing, the ANC must start being honest with itself, because for the first time in its existence, this is, I think, the weakest the ANC has ever been. The morale within the party is the weakest it's ever been. The tripartite alliance is as weak as it's ever been. The union situation is as weak as it's ever been. And the ANC in and of itself now cannot be celebratory like it has always been in the January 8th statement, because ever since 1994, the January 8th statement was a celebration of how far the ANC has come as a liberation movement. But now, I think it's time for the ANC to stop celebrating its liberation past and now start to talk about its governing present. And I think the present that they've never confronted before in a meaningful way. And I think that's going to be a very difficult task for the Secretary General, but also for the President, Cyril Ramaphosa.
All right. And speaking of the present, how important is it for the ANC to address issues of accountability and transparency in the statement?
It's going to be very important, but also to discuss issues of identity, right? Because even if we're talking about accountability and transparency, what identity is the ANC taking on, considering that they are now in a grand coalition with the DA, which in essence is its polar opposite, right? And then also, what does this mean for its communist roots and going forward for their sort of like egalitarian society that they wanted to build that included some socialist elements? What does this all mean for the identity of the ANC? But also, where does this put the country in general as far as the ANC's confidence in what they're doing to move the needle forward in governing the country effectively?
All right. Today, the SG of the ANC and the deputy president will be engaging communities in Cape Town ahead of the ANC's 113th anniversary. So, Leeto, do you think that choosing Cape Town was a calculated move to regain political ground and influence in the Western Cape?
I think they have to go and engage Cape Town because that has always been a sore point for the ANC, right? Like we're talking about their weakness in governance, and their first major loss in governance came as a result of losing the Western Cape, right? And so now, thinking of where they are, the weakness that the ANC suffers is essentially emanating from that sore point of the Western Cape not being part of the ANC in any large and meaningful way. If you think about it, you can name provincial leadership from everywhere: Eastern Cape, Free State, Gauteng, but you can't name provincial leadership from the Western Cape in the ANC, meaning that the ANC is almost becoming extinct in the Western Cape. And I think they have to do something to stem the bleeding there, because a new bleeding point is already starting to appear in KZN. And I think this was a strategic move to move away from giving attention to the MK party and the battle that's happening in KZN, and to start anew and try to find new expression in the Western Cape.
But now, is Ramaphosa's leadership even capable of saving the ANC in the Western Cape?
Well, I don't think so. But right now, Cyril Ramaphosa has no choice but to engage in those politics that look like he's challenging the DA because now confidence has fallen on him inside the ANC, right? Because it seems like he's working to please the DA. So he must look like he's challenging the DA in some meaningful fashion in order for him to rein in some of his detractors inside the ANC. So in and of himself, he's in a very, very precarious position as the leader of the ANC because he's in between a rock and a hard place, and he needs to start reinventing his message. Thuma Mina is not working, so something else must start coming from his messaging.
But now the ANC is expressing confidence about the 2026 local elections. Now, given the recent challenges, what are your initial thoughts on their prospects for a bounce back?
So yeah, the ANC would show confidence when it comes to any kind of election, right? They are this giant organization. But here's the one problem about the ANC. Even that giant status of theirs is also their Achilles heel. They don't want to acknowledge the fact that they are a bleeding giant. They're no longer a big, healthy giant that could just sweep up elections like they did before. Their confidence is based off of by-elections and in about councilorships and councillor positions. But at the end of the day, the ANC is not acknowledging the elephant in the room, is that society, by and large, has no confidence in the ANC anymore like it used to. And that could leave them hemorrhaging a lot of votes and at times barely winning any municipalities. And that kind of confidence, I think, was the kind of confidence that led them to the disappointment of having to go with tail tucked between legs and going to try and negotiate with the likes of the DA and the EFF for some kind of coalition when they lost the election recently.
And speaking of the DA, do you think that disagreements within the ANC regarding the coalition with the DA could have implications for the party's electoral success in upcoming elections?
I think it would, because remember, even now, even though they're in a grand coalition, the DA is still pressing forward in challenging individuals like Panyaza Lesotho, who are prominent leaders inside the ANC, and trying to undermine them. And so that's why we go back to this sort of grand idea about identity, especially thinking about January 8th, is that what is the messaging that is going to come from the center? Because that's what the ANC prides itself, that they have the centrist view of everything, that the center would emanate a message and the branches would have to run with the message. And so what is the message regarding the DA when you are now in a grand coalition with them, but every chance they get, they try to undermine the leadership of the ANC? And so that is a tightrope that Cyril Ramaphosa must walk as well. And I think he's gonna do a lot of circus acts, because he's walking some tightrope here and juggling the interests of the DA, the GNU, and also internal politics of the ANC.
Yeah, let's expand more on the subject matter of coalition. Do you think that the ANC nationally should learn from the Gauteng ANC's coalition choices? There are those who believe that the Gauteng coalition choice would save the ANC if adopted nationally.
I think the dynamic nationally is way more different, because the ANC is trying to bring about sort of a unified front in order to boost investor confidence. And it actually did, right? Ratings agencies suddenly considered us as stable when the GNU sort of formed and became one thing. But could be less stable and put us in a more dangerous position economically if the ANC then were to run on a minority government basis, because the minority government doesn't enjoy as much confidence as a government that is unified, even across political or philosophical ideologies. And I think that was the biggest thing that they were trying to do. And going forward, that is going to be their arresting feature, that they are trying to impress more than the ANC. They're trying to create a unified front that is not trying to be sort of negative in its outlook. And I think that is why they can't take the cue from what the Gauteng government is doing, because the Gauteng government is still strong whether or not it's a minority government.
All right. And before I let you go, Leeto, lastly and very briefly, as the ANC is about to celebrate its 113th birthday, essentially, what internal reforms and processes are essential, do you think, for the ANC to remain a relevant and effective force in South African society?
I think, one, the encouraging of the unions to now become more independent of what the ANC has already afforded them, right? Right now, the unions are seen as a lame duck organization that just latches on to whatever the ANC says and stays being letting the workers be abused by policies from the ANC. And so that's the first thing. But second thing is also try to make amends as it pertains to the SACB and see if they can't bring the SACB closer to the ANC and change their role inside the tripartite alliance. And I think now is the time where the ANC must think deeply about what the tripartite alliance means. Is it going to be that the tripartite alliance as we know it comes to an end, or are they going to somehow evolve the alliance to become something different and something that might make the ANC stronger in the future? Because at this moment, it seems that they're at the precipice of it all falling apart because of views that are divergent inside each of the three partners in the tripartite alliance.